Heads up, you guys, this is another scripted video, so if it looks like I'm not looking at the camera, again, it's because I wrote down legit everything I wanted to say so I wouldn't forget anything, and so I won't ramble as much, but still make sure that it's not a crazy long video, even though I don't think this will be under 20 minutes, but I'm going to try. So let's get into it. Some sorcerers do boast they have a rod, gathered with vows and sacrifice, and borne about will strangely nod. To hidden treasures where it lies, mankind is sure that rod divine, for to the wealthiest ever they incline. What do all the forms of divination that we're going to be talking about today have in common? Well, it's because they fall under a branch of study called kinesiology, and also known as the Ideomotor Effect. Now, what's kinesiology? Kinesiology is the scientific study of human movement, and the Ideomotor Effect is a psychological phenomenon that causes people to make unconscious movements. We're talking about these specific types of divination today because it relies on your hands to hold an object and the movement it makes for the results of that divination. Do you know that dowsing rods have their own name? Using dowsing rods is actually a type of divination called Rhabdomancy. It literally means dowsing with a rod or a stick. That's it. That's the definition. Now, if you've seen the video that I did on old earth magic and Leylines and fairies and ghosts in their folklore, you might remember me saying that dowsing rods were the only instrument that were able to pick up on a pattern between all the sacred spots and the Leylines. I told you I would go into more detail about dowsing rods, pendulums, Ouija boards, automatic writing, so on and so forth. And I'm probably going to add in some techniques that you most likely haven't heard of before. Well, strap on in, because this is that video. We're going to go into dowsing rods and even the military's uses of them during active war, as well as divination techniques that uses a live rooster to spell out things for you. And yes, I'm serious. More on that later. Let's go to dowsing rods first. Now, as you heard me say before, dowsing rods have been around since at least the 15th century. However, it was around even before then. Ancient Egyptians and Babylonians dowsed using split reeds. And the early Chinese emperor, Huang Yu, who was around like 22,000 BC, was known to have dowsed. Feng Shui evolved from linking geomancy with rhabdomancy. I know I briefly touched on it in my Leyline video, but if you're not familiar with like geomancy basically is interpreting the structure of the land around you. You know, images in the dirt, the way certain branches fell. You're literally divining the land. For a very brief sum up of it. There's more that gets into it, but just to keep it brief. Now, most people today, when they think of dowsing rods, they think of those metal L-shaped rods that you hold in each hand. Not this. This is a Rubik's Cube. But these ones that you just saw me use a few seconds ago. But that's not what the original dowsing rods even look like. If you've seen the movie Coraline, then you already know if you weren't familiar before. It was a forked stick. So normally woods like hazel and willow and peach and like other fruit trees that were found by water were used. It's like sympathetic magic and the law of contagion. The essence of like will represent and or attract like. For the stick dowsing rods, this one is pine, so this one normally wouldn't be used, but it's what I had in my backyard. When you would hold the ends, they could be a complete V with just a little nub, or they could have a big long nub like this. They could be bigger, they could be wider. It just had to be a forked stick so you had handles. And the bottom of the stick would dip down when you're heading in a direction. Sorry, my boyfriend left the door open the other day, and I have a fly that came in again that doesn't want to leave me alone. Anyway, because of these sticks being from the earth, they were believed to be able to pick on cavities in the earth or where graves would be or hidden treasures, water, anything like that. As well, it's believed to affect the earth's electromagnetic field and sense disturbances in it. Same thing with these types of dowsing rods that are used today that are normally made out of copper. But again, to be sensitive with the earth and the earth's magnetic field, as well as being able to pick up disturbances in the earth, be it as an energy force moving in or something that was taken out. Again, that is the common belief in these, that they're very sensitive to the earth's energy and anything that disrupts it. So like I said, dowsing was used to find water sources, but they were adapted for other causes, like pre-mining culture. Dowsing was also used to find precious metals and minerals, and this is where I personally believe the ability to use it to communicate with spirits was added in. Because the pre-mining folklore is wild, worlds with dowsing rods, but I'm going to just tell one story just to keep it brief. Pre-mining culture was crazy superstitious, as were a lot of people back around that time, and like people are still superstitious now. That doesn't matter. Around this pre-mining culture, there are tons of shared beliefs of gnomes, gnome-like creatures and spirits and beings and entities, to just kind of keep it broad, that protected the minerals of the earth. You know, all the shinies, all the my precious. That was terrible, but Gollum's voice just shivers me, even though I love Lord of the Rings. Anyway, all these creatures and spirits were believed to watch over these minerals. So it would be very common that they were sighted when being doused. So I had found this story. Okay, I'm going to read it to you right now. A group of miners once set out with a rod to a region reputably rich in mineral deposits. The rod dipped strongly before a loud noise echoed through the forest, and the lantern extinguished, as if the evil spirit would appear. The miners ran home and never tried the dowsing rod again. The miners believed that their divining rod had led them straight to a spirit when they were hoping to find minerals. You know, and then after this story, more and more tales and superstitious type stories came out. It might have been the gateway. It's a very common belief that spirits and energy forces are attracted to minerals and metals. Think of the stone tape theory, right? Like limestone and all that stuff. Quartz, however, is scientifically proven to produce its own energy. I'm sure most of you have heard of piezoelectricity, but under pressure, quartz can generate its own energy. You don't believe me? Well, you know what? I'm going to show you real quick. We're going to run to my bathroom.
Welcome to my bathroom. This is take 2. This is take 2 because there is an airplane going by. That's not why. But because of the first one, I had the camera facing the opposite way so you couldn't actually see anything that I was doing. So this is what I look like when I'm editing videos. And I'm going to show you right now how to make your own electricity with your crystals real quick. These are 2 pieces of quartz. Yes, they look a little bit different. This one actually has wax on it from a spell. But we're going to use the raw sides of the quartz. They almost look like they would fit together. Isn't that weird? But I got 2 similar ones, and I'm actually going to stand in my bathtub to make sure you can see me, but I'm going to just turn off the lights because you have to do this in the dock. So I'm going to do this in one motion so you can see everything so it doesn't look like you're missing anything. I just realized, hopefully, my shower is clean. I live alone, so when I wash my hair, whenever my hair comes off on my hands, I wipe it on my shower. I know that sounds gross, but you know what? That's the truth. So I'm going to move this in so I can shut the door. Get to look at everything else. Oh, look at all my products that I use. Whoa, I'm so creative. I'm going to stand right here, and now I'm going to turn off the light and hopefully not fall, but just so it's complete darkness. Okay, ready? Let's turn off this light, and you won't be able to see me, but maybe you can. We'll see. Ooh, it is dark. Oh, you could kind of see me. All right. I can't see. I just see from the glow of the phone. All right, ready? Here are the 2 crystals. Again, I'm leaving this as one continuous shot so you could see everything. Where's the bottom? Oh my gosh, now I can't even see the bottom. You know, watch me fail. I'm like blinded from looking at the thing. Ready? I can't see what I'm doing. You see how it's like a different type of spark than you would with like flint? Flint has like a different color spark. And this will have a different smell than compared to, again, like hitting flint or anything else like that. Just normal quartz crystals. And that's how they, oh my gosh, it's so bright compared to nothing. And that's how they produce energy. I don't know if you'll be able to see it with like the lights on. Probably not. No, it's with the lights off. All right. I'm going back to editing and drinking coffee. See you guys in a second.
And we're back. But think of what is believed to generate spirit activity. Minerals. Water is believed to amplify spiritual and paranormal activity as well. And this is narrowed down to the fact that water is an electrical conductor and it can generate basic energy. I'm using energy in a broad term, I know, but you know, water wheels, things like that in these spaces to generate power. But it's also down to spiritual and folklore beliefs as well. Water is both life-giving and life-taking. It's cleansing and purifying like being baptized baptized, but it could be terrifying as a tsunami. It can mean food. Normally, it's everything, especially to early people. Metals were important as well. So if you work with planetary magic, you already know all the gods and planets associated with specific metals. But our ancestors, metals were weapons. They were currency. They were tools. They were important. King Tut had that dagger made out of meteorite in its ore. Like, how cool is that? That's not related to anything. That just made me think of that. Anyway, sorry, tangent. Dowsing rods were used to find all of these things. And all these things are connected with beliefs with spirits. So soon, they were used for more than just trying to find water, minerals, and metals. They were used to find spirits. But that got some attention from the church. Martin Luther spoke out about dowsing rods in either 1518 or 1519. The reports are kind of conflict, but he had referred to it as ideology, which was like the first time that was really used with dowsing rods and pendulums and any type of that divination work that involves your hands. He was saying that it went against the first commandment and that it was believed to be in the same league as witchcraft. Whoops. There's also a book from a few years later called Re Metallica! No relation to the band. But it was published in 1556, where they go crazy in detail, telling exactly how to cut, where to find, what type of wood to use for divining. But this was all for mining metals. I'm going to leave little snippets of it up in case you're interested and you want to know, because it's fascinating. So you could pause to read right here. But spoiler alert, at the end, he somewhat agrees with Martin Luther that they should not be used, which is totally understandable. The Re Metallica's author, Georgius Agricola, I butchered that. Georgius Agricola. Remember, it's like Coca-Cola at the end. But he was a practical and logical man, and Martin Luther was a religious man, and it went against his beliefs about God, which is understandable for his beliefs. But you'll also have people who believe that the biblical Moses used his staff for divining. And the American Society of Dowsers, yeah, that's a thing. The American Society of Dowsers. It's a real thing. It's a club. Look it up. But they see dowsing as an act of God. And there's a prayer that they recite that goes as follows whenever they start to use their rods. Lord, guide my hands, enhance my sensitivity, and bless my purpose, that I may be an instrument of your power and glory in locating what is searched for. So, with spiritual beliefs, it's kind of a mixed bag, but even after that, dowsing rods took another turn, and that turn was medical diagnosis. And who was behind that turn? Catholic priest. Abbe Alexis Timothee Bouly, or Bouly, I'm going to butcher the name, I'm sorry. I'm just going to refer to him now as Bouly, started receiving press coverage starting in the 1920s and continuing through to his death in the late 1950s for his claims to have discovered a plethora of things via dowsing. And that list is, quote, lost treasures and human remains to underground springs and mineral veins. I don't think that was supposed to rhyme, but I made it rhyme. In addition to being able to diagnose disease. To be fair, he used a pendulum for the health diagnoses, but apparently he was able to identify cultures of microbes in test tubes with his pendulum as easily as he was looking through a microscope, allegedly. And he was not the only one to do this. There's so many more if you look into it, but this is just a brief sum up about Bouly because it's the perfect segue to the last part about dowsing rods I'm going to talk about. So, at the end of World War I, Bouly was brought to Reims. Just dropped a dowsing rod. But Bouly was brought to Reims, which is a city in France. He was French. Because they wanted to see something, okay? They wanted to examine him and his alleged dowsing ability to see if he could find unexploded shells buried beneath the ground. But wait, there's more! Not only that, they wanted him to find these buried unexploded shells, but before they were brought up from the ground, they wanted Bouly to tell them if they were German, Austrian, or French manufactured before they were brought up. Okay? And apparently, allegedly, he was so impressive in his ability to find these and name what they were that he was recommended to the Ministry of War in Paris. Like, damn, wow, okay, go off. I wonder if that happening is what inspired the US military to use dowsing rods during active war. What's that? Oh, you didn't know that the US military used dowsing rods, during active war? Now you do. Now, this isn't the same thing as the CIA doing remote viewing and all those other methods. This is strictly on the US military. Everything with the CIA is a whole other topic. And it wasn't just the US, but we'll get to that in a second. Before we go into the US, we have to explain the 4 different types of dowsings that are done with dowsing rods. Now, there's 4 basic methods of dowsing. 1, field dowsing. Their traditional use of dowsing, which includes locating water, minerals, cavities, graves, metals, whatever. Witching the area, the most famous form of dowsing. 2, remote dowsing. So the dowser locates our target. My accent was fighting so hard on that one. Did you hear it? Target. But anyway, they locate a target from a distance from, up to several miles. Then there's 3, map dowsing. This is normally a pendulum, and it does not matter how far away they are as long as they have the map of where they're trying to locate said item, person, whatever in front of them. Then there's 4, informational dowsing. The dowser obtains needed information from any subject with neither time nor space limits. Think of basic spirit communication. Now that we know those types of dowsings, we can move on to the next part of dowsing. So there are certain guidelines for dowsing. The main thing is always decide precisely what you seek and ask for it in unmistakable terms. You want to make sure you have a set thing that you're looking for and asking. And that's precisely what the US military, specifically the Marines, did during the Vietnam War. So somewhere between 1966 and 1968, the US Marine Corps went so far as to train a small group to douse for Viet Cong tunnels. The Marine Corps Development and Educational Command, I think that's right, put the Leathernecks through a 4-hour training, on the practice. And they had a course with it too. They were also instructed to locate hidden weapons and find booby traps with their dowsing rods. So the dowsing rods that the Marine Corps used, they just took basic metal coat hangers and bent them in the basic L separate hand holding dowsing rods. They just used coat hangers to try and find these Viet Cong tunnels and booby traps and hidden weapons. So there's also something that's a bit more heavier that happened more recent than the Vietnam War when it comes to dowsing rods. So between 2009 and 2010, a British company named ATSC, they stand for the Advanced Tactical and Security Communications Limited, came out with the ADE 651 among other devices. What is the ADE 651? This was a long-distance dowsing device used to locate boom booms, explosives. I don't know if I can say the actual word on YouTube, but you know what I mean. But they were dowsing devices that were supposed to act like a dowsing rod would at a distance to locate these explosives. And they were sold by this company for anywhere between $40,000 and $66,000 each. I'm going to show one of the devices right now. This is how much that they went for. They sold these to over 20 countries in the Middle East and Asia. I think it might have been the Iraqi government. I could be wrong. Please double check and do your homework. Just don't take this at face value. I'm going from memory, but they had spent 52 million either dollars or pounds on these devices. These remote explosive locating dowsing rods. Sadly, these devices were not accurate, and many lost their lives because of them. The couple responsible for making these devices were convicted of fraud, and they were sentenced to over 10 years of jail at the time of 2013. I do not know if they're still serving or not, or if more time was added. I know that one was a lot heavier than everything else that we talked about with dowsing rods, but as we're giving their history and story, I think, it's important to cover all aspects of it to realize how deep they really go and acknowledge all the people affected by them, even if they're no longer here because of them. I think most people wouldn't think that a divination tool could cause so much damage, but desperate times would call for desperate measures. I feel like most of you are familiar with pendulums anyway, so I won't have to go into much detail and history with pendulums as I did with the dowsing rods. Plus, more of you guys were asking for more information on the dowsing rods anyway. So we're going to move on to pendulums before we start getting a little bit weird. Hope you guys are with me so far. Sometimes I feel like I have the perfect voice to zone out to and not actually obtain any information, and hopefully this history history lesson is helping you understand the history of dowsing rods before we go into a little bit more stuff. So we're going to move to pendulums real quick. As you can see, I have a whole bunch behind me. Historically, pendulums have been around as long as dowsing rods. You know, they've been used throughout the centuries, from explorers, mathematicians, scientists, the oracles of Delphi, so on and so forth. The main difference between pendulums and dowsing rods, obviously, besides their shape, is that most people could use pendulums with a pendulum board. That way, if they wanted to spell out things, they can, versus dowsing rods. But technically, you could use dowsing rods for spelling too, but just most don't. And obviously, the first pendulums were like rocks, stones, beads. Rocks and stones are the same thing. Sorry, I just had a long work event and I was like, I gotta film this video. Anyway, you know what I mean. Very basic things that some people still use now because you know what? They work. So enough about pendulums. We're going to move on to automatic writing now, which I actually find the most fascinating out of all of these. So for automatic writing, there's two forms of it. The first one is with a solo person. They'll start to channel, and once they start connect, they'll write down what they're picking up around them. Now, there is actually a technique to this. You don't just sit there and put on headphones or whatever. There's an actual technique that most people, if you've like taken classes and learned from people who have been doing this a long time with automatic writing, there's a certain way that they want you to start stimulating your frontal cortex and the different hemispheres of your brain. And that's breathing through one nostril, which is actually very popular in a lot of yogi and mantra beliefs. But what you would do is you would block your right nostril and take in deep breaths through your left nostril up. And then, you know, you could either write in your dominant hand or your non-dominant hand. Afterwards, you could listen to white noise and static after that. You could be blindfolded, whatever it is that you want to do. But you have to start by breathing in through one nostril. I know that sounds really weird, but I don't know. I kind of dig it. I don't really see a lot of people do that, though. I see just a lot of people just go. And you know what? If that works for them, then that works for them. But I really like the brain stimulation, not simulation, whatever. You know what I mean. The other form of automatic writing is normally with a group of people. And they'll have like a planchette or something that's movable with a pen or a stick in the middle of it, and everyone puts their fingers on it. Or everyone holds on to like a pen. This isn't a pen, this is a porcupine quill, but we're going to pretend that it's a pen. And everyone will put their fingers on the pen together and see what way it moves. You know, you could use it that way if you don't have the planchette board. And then everyone interprets what it says. So speaking of spelling and words, let's give a quick mention to other forms of divination that I don't see mentioned enough, and maybe one of those will inspire you to try something new to your practice. And none of these have anything to do with the Ideomotor Effect, which again, don't forget, we're going to go into that. So the first one, I have them written down because even though I pronounce them in my head, hi candles, even though I pronounce them in my head, saying them out loud is a different story. So I literally wrote them down. So you'll see me looking at my screen again if you haven't already from me checking it time to time. But the first one is astroglomancy, also known as cubomancy or astrogomancy. I don't pronounce it like that because I can't even say it. I'll put the word up so you know what I was trying to say. You try and say that. You could probably say it fine. It's just me. Anyway, but that's a form of divination that uses dice specifically marked with letters or numbers. Most people sell them as spirit dice. Then we have the sphere of life and death, and that's based on onomancy or name divination. So it's built on the numerical values of letters, and you know, there's Greek and Semitic languages, like Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, I think. There's others, but they all have an alphabetical system, which letters have numerical values. The only thing is, if you were to use Latin, the hell was I trying to say? Their alphabet doesn't have like an intrinsic, like numerical value, so you wouldn't be able to use that for this type of divination. Then there's also bibliomancy. You know, you open a book to a random page at a certain passage and you read that passage and you use your books for your divination, you know. And now we have a weird one. We have electromancy or electomancy. It's the Greek rooster divination. So I know this one, but I wrote it down because I feel like I would be laughing, and I don't mean to laugh, but just because like I feel like if I were to do this to not make the rooster feel awkward, I would be following and mimicking the rooster while the rooster was trying to do its divination, and that's all I could picture is me mimicking a rooster back in time so the rooster wouldn't feel awkward as I'm trying to get a message from the rooster. I know that doesn't make sense, but it makes me laugh in my head, so I had to write it down so I wouldn't laugh. So the diviner observes, most preferably, a white rooster pecking at like grain, like wheat and stuff, that is scattered on the ground, okay? The observer may place grain in the shape of letters and then just find a divination meaning in that, noting which letters that the bird pecks at. They also can try and divine through the bird pecking through the grain in like a random pattern. Or they could put the bird, in the center of a circle around a perimeter, which the alphabet is there, and there's a piece of grain for each letter. And then every time the bird picks a certain grain with the letter, the person writes down the letter and replaces the grain. That way numbers can be repeated. There's also a crazy story about a horse that could spell out things that actually solved the case of a missing boy. Just made me think about that. Look into that one. Anyway, most of the time when the bird would be in a circle, the bird would be tethered. That way it couldn't go any further, but it would go round and round in the circle spelling out letters. This form of divination is actually related to the Ouija board by the the random selection of letters. It's also to gyromancy, because it's the random selection of letters from a circle. Think of like a gyro, like a spear. And then obviously to onoscopy, which is the divination of birds. Speaking of Ouija boards, the Ouija spirit board, talking board, angel board, whatever you know it by, is a well divination tool that's very popular for the Ideomotor Effect. All the Ouija board is another divination tool for communication. I swear to you, that is all it is. It's no different than using a pendulum and a pendulum board. Since it's more of an instant gratification type of thing, it has been absolutely destroyed by Hollywood, much like how witches were and still are. So now the Ouija board has become like this collective conscious bubble of fear and negativity to become its own egregore of sorts. You know what I mean? Basically, everyone has a terrible Ouija story from themselves, or they heard it from someone else, or it happened to somebody else. And a lot of people will swear that they will never use them and they'll never touch them, but yet they'll use other forms of divination. But again, that form of divination tool is no different than any other form of divination tool. There is no difference. Look into it. Research it. I have. I mean, really research it. It's no different. Hollywood and other people just want you to think it's different. And that way you'll have people go, I've used this divination tool and that divination tool and this, that, and the other divination tool. And the Ouija board is the only one I've had a negative experience with. Again, they did the same thing with witchcraft. And a lot of people still believe the Hollywood versions of things. When it comes to witchcraft, they still believe that you make pacts with the devil like it's 1600s or something else like that. Again, it is just a communication tool. Like all tools, you have to use them with respect. Just because one has been Hollywoodized doesn't mean that you should fear it. People are still scared of witches because of Hollywood, and not all of us are bad. However, I will say, if you honestly have a fear of using something, then don't use it. You want to be confident in whatever divination tool you use. Just use proper manners with all of them, and don't let your fear control you. Otherwise, you'll have a bad time and think it's the tool's fault, or the tool let in something that you shouldn't have. Fear controls more than we know, and so does the mind. Speaking of the mind, we're going to talk about the Ideomotor Effect and how it plays into witchcraft. More specifically, these forms of divination. I know I gave you the definition of the Ideomotor Effect, earlier on again, but I'll give it to you again. The Ideomotor Effect is when a person makes unconscious, keyword unconscious, micro movements. You won't even notice yourself making these movements. They'll be so slight even when you're trying to be as still as possible. Now, you're probably wondering, why is a witch telling me this? Does she not believe in this? Is she a hypocrite? She has 12 pendulums behind her. The reason why I'm bringing it up in this video is because I think it's important to be aware of all possibilities. We can't be ignorant of other explanations and possibilities just because we believe in witchcraft, if that makes any sense, which I really hope it does. Now, the Ideomotor Effect is really popular around Ouija boards, especially being used by people who are scared to use them to begin with. Besides the belief that fear brings negativity, like that aside, if you're so scared or nervous that the planchette is going to move in a certain way, your body can manipulate it to subconsciously move that way. It'll do the thing that you fear, again, without you being aware of it. Since it's all unconscious movements, this could happen even if you're just staring at the Ouija board and you know you're freaked out by it. Your body could automatically want to move towards the thing things that you're thinking of without even realize that you're thinking of them. Then anything else that happens afterwards, if something falls over or if a candle blows out or whatever it is, anything that happens will be played into that fear because you're going to be looking at it through the lens of fear now. The same thing can be applied to dowsing rods. When people were trying to find minerals, certain subconscious lays in the land can be clues, right? And the person can be highly perceptive, you know what I mean? I have a headache, I'm so sorry. But think of the dowsing rod or the pendulum, you know? They think it's going to be this great thing that's going to lead them to that and not realize that it was themselves all along. The same thing can be applied to groundwater. Technically, groundwater is everywhere. And certain ground clues can like lead us to where it'll be closer to the surface, you know, without us even being aware. That way you won't even have to dig that far. You'd be like, there's water right here. The divining rod said so. And boom, 3 inches down, bada bing, bada boom, you got some water. It's like a reflex that's like ingrained in us or something, you know? For as long as we've been around to try and find water, because sometimes water meant life or death. Water meant nourishment. It meant life. So it could be part of the animal survival instinct in us that's been ingrained for as long as we've been around. Same with pendulums. If we're asking a yes or no answer that we're torn about, our subconscious can give us the answer that we seek. Now, talking about our subconscious can bring up a lot of questions. Is our subconscious our higher self? The brain can do crazy things. One of them being the placebo effect. Placebo, which is where you at? I know you all know what the placebo effect is, but what's so crazy about it is that scientists and neurologists, you know what I mean? They can't explain it. We know it works for some people and we know it exists, but we don't know why it exists. Yeah, it's the placebo effect. But regardless, it's still an effect that we somehow brought on without any scientific explanation for how. And if you think you know what the placebo effect is, or like how it works, you better let the health and scientific community know because they've been trying to figure it out forever and they're nowhere close to figuring it out yet. On a side note, this makes me think of like a theory I had for like years and years and years since I was a teenager that had to do with like telepathy, you know, like mind reading telepathic messages. I can't talk now. And it had to do with the cryptochrome located in humans' eyes, as well as observing the tongue since it's directly connected to the brainstem. I know this sounds like a crackpot theory, but the other day I was thinking about it because I was talking about it to my boyfriend and I was kind of like, because I've told him about it before, like, you know, random things I get from reading different like science articles. And I actually found a scientist that wrote a thesis on it because now they think that telepathy could be possible and they were testing it out and it was the same exact thought that I had with the cryptochrome located in the eyes reading and scanning the tongue since the tongue is used for communication. And again, direct connection to the brainstem with so much is connected to the tongue. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with anything. That just made me think about it when I was like, if you could figure out the placebo effect, let someone else know. It's just crazy that a scientist is like thinking of the same things that I was when I was like 15 or 16. That's just wild to me. Anyway, the placebo effect. It basically shouldn't work, but it does. The issue with the scientific method is that it applies to like material things. You know what I mean? Metaphysics isn't really material, so it's hard to apply the scientific method to something like that, you know what I mean? But we still try to automatically to make it make sense. That's why they'll call certain sciences pseudoscience. It's like explanation for phenomenon that sounds scientific, but they don't have any backing yet. But sometimes these pseudosciences can become real science. Is that the proper name for it? Real science? But that could happen. And you know what the most famous of that cases? Chemistry. Chemistry actually originated from alchemy. Isn't that wild? So like back in medieval times, trying to turn like lead into gold, the elixir of life, like the philosopher's stone, the limelight and spotlight that we use like in theater today, that was made like with alchemy. And it was looked up as a type of like pseudoscience for so long because of like its airy magic nature, and it wasn't believed to be true or accurate. Who's laughing now? When we use dowsing rods or a pendulum or anything like that, we have to get into a certain mindset to use the tool, right? Most people will start with like a nice deep breath in. Some people aren't even aware that they're taking in that resetting deep breath. You know, you heard me explain how people do automatic writing, the certain breathing that stimulates the brain and everything else like that. Once you're focused on your divination tool and like locked in, you're basically in another state. You're focus, and your focus is to make this thing work. Your focus is to see if anything happens. When you truly believe in it, you're more focused and locked in compared to like when you're doubtful, you're not fully locked in. And that applies to everything. It could very well be that maybe when we're in that state, it's possible that we can become a vessel of sorts. Think of how much better you are at something when you're focusing on it and in the zone versus like when you're half-assing it. You're fully in tune when you're focusing on it. And when you're fully in tune, you could be potentially tapping into something greater than yourself. Or that great thing could actually be yourself. We tend to have an intuition for a reason. And that's what some of us follow when we do these things. Especially automatic writing and certain cases with Ouija boards will follow our intuition to spell out certain things. I believe we all have a little bit of the clairs, be it clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, clairaudience, like whatever it is. I believe we all have something that we're a little bit sensitive to. And maybe, just maybe, being in that state isn't always the ideomotor effect. It's never 100% certain that your observation and the interpretation are correct. My house just knocked twice. I don't know if you heard that because my microphone was right here. I hear you, house. Again, I just wanted to do this video because the stuff that I see on divination and witchcraft never mentions the ideomotor effect. And I think it's important that if some people aren't aware of it, that they are. It's all just explained as spirit. Spirit is always communicating with you, and you're just supposed to take that at face value without trying to look past the who, what, why, where, how, and figure out things for yourself. And that's not very helpful, telling everybody that everything is spirit when, there are other things. Some people make intense and ridiculous decisions using a pendulum. I'm not passing any judgment, but you don't want someone to do like a really big one and be like, I did this because spirit told me. I just want the information to be available to everyone, especially if you never heard of this before. And if you're ever doubtful with your tools, there are things as pendulum holders, so you can do it with just one pendulum. This is just where I store mine. You could put your dowsing rods in a cup to hold them and communicate with them that way. That way you're not physically holding anything. If you're like, okay, if my movements are all over the place, then, I'm just going to put it down and try and, focus on the energy that way. But also some people believe that the items don't come to life unless you're physically holding them and connecting with them, because then you're connecting with it, then you're giving it life. So it's up to you and your belief system and how you work with your tool. I hope this video gave you some new information. I don't know why I was so intense in your face like this, but I hope it gave you some new information on things and maybe some things to think about and maybe some ways to try and expand your craft. The best way to get to advancing your craft is with more information and adapting your craft around that. And all I want to do is help you guys advance your craft and think about other things and test other things. And I want you all to become badass witches. I don't want any of you to doubt yourself or doubt your power after watching this. I want to inspire you. Like I said, test out some things and make your craft your own. Face any fears, understand new things, or maybe see things with a new light and appreciation. I know after I'd learned some things about dowsing rods, granted I've known this stuff for a while, but it made me look at dowsing rods with a whole new light and appreciation for it, as weird as that sounds. Knowledge is power, and we never stop learning and we never stop growing. I know this was a long video, and if you made it this far, leave a crystal ball emoji in the comments, right now. Do it right now, real quick. Just click that emoji for the divination, and just so I know how many people actually watched it to the end, and I'm so sorry. This was so long, and if you like the video, and if you don't like it, that's totally fine too. Hopefully this gave you some information, and if you don't agree with me, that's totally fine. Again, just want to spread the knowledge to other people who aren't aware and make you guys want to dissect your craft and understand it and actually make you guys get more hands-on in your craft. I hope you're having a great day, night, energy, space for whatever time it is for you. And my house knocked again. And I really, truly hope that good things happen to you. Bye.